achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and in this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night Abu Dhabi event, which will take place on April 11th. We've had a pretty solid break since our last event, but we have a heck of a lot of MMA in a very short period of time coming up. I'm coming off arguably one of my worst events in the history of predicting. I went 2-8-1, I think, 2-7-1, 2-8-1 at the last UFC Fight Night event, with pretty much almost every fight ending with an upset, which was pretty disappointing and very hard to cap, but most people struggled regardless. Now, I promised if I had a bad bet night, my bet packs would be free to all those who purchased them. So if you purchased a bet pack, make sure you send me a quick email to kamikazeoverdrive@live.ca to make sure I have the proper email to send the password to you. That way you're not missing out. Obviously, if I don't have your email, I can't send it to you. So either way, double check with that, and I'll make sure to send it out to you. We've got 4 fights. I'm starting fresh, feeling a little bit re-energized by the break, which I think they don't happen enough, these 2-3 week breaks. It's a pretty good solid card. 4 main card fights I'm going to break down for you, so let's get to the first one. Our opening fight of the night takes place in UFC's lightweight division as 9-4 Ramsey Nijem, Ultimate Fighter finalist, takes on undefeated 7-0 Beneil Dariush. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I'll try my best. Nijem's coming off a win over Justin Edwards, which ended a 2-fight losing streak, while Dariush subbed Charlie Brenneman in an upset in his promotional debut, which he took on short notice. Now, one thing we have comparison here, this is Nijem. I think he's got 7 fights coming in this. He has a lot of experience versus opponent Dariush. He had very limited experience with a very short fight against Charlie Brenneman. We'll see if that has an effect, certainly favoring Nijem nonetheless. Now, Dariush, Muay Thai fighter, likes to counter-strike. He threw a variety of kicks against Brenneman, a nice hard leg kick, went high a couple times, flashed a front kick that he really didn't land. Also threw a jumping knee that came up well short, but still it showed that he has that in his arsenal. He does have 2 knockouts in his very short pro career, and we saw him drop Brenneman with a well-timed left hand. Not a lot of setup, but it still landed. It showed he has some solid pop. His Muay Thai clinch is pretty decent as well. He can do damage with elbows and knees. And he scored his last knockout over catching opponent off the break, which is something I expect him to try and do against Nijem here. Now, for Ramsey, his striking looked improved in his last fight, and that's been one of the biggest concerns with the former Ultimate Fighter finalist. He was still aggressive, he still got hit, but he wasn't as reckless as he has been in the past, like what cost him against Myles Jury. He still has some work to do, though. He throws some decent kicks, he will land with his hands, but he's got to tighten things up further. He did get hit with some big shots against his opponent, but he was able to avoid taking that big fight-ending blast that has plagued him in the past. Now, the thing is, Justin Edwards' opponent in his last fight, not a massive threat on the feet, just 1 knockout, and he had a 5.5-inch reach disadvantage that he had to overcome, which certainly stunted his striking abilities. To put things in perspective, I think Dariush is going to be a much better striker than Justin Edwards and will threaten Ramsey with what he's on the feet. Now, Nijem can still unravel under pressure, and that's something I'm concerned. I expect him to see him raising his chin up as he has in the past, because fighters, no matter what they're working on, especially young guys, still go back to those bad tendencies they've had in the past, and he still will leave some openings against a striker who's going to put pressure on him and not just swing wildly at him like Edwards did. Again, we're not that far removed from seeing Ramsey Nijem make the mistake and get subbed by Vic or get knocked out by Myles Jury, despite the improvements he showed in his last outing. Now, Nijem is a good wrestler. He will attempt submissions, 5.4 takedowns at 57%, and he showed some decent scrambles in that Jury fight. And, it was a back-and-forth bout on the ground. He won some of the transitions. He lost some of them. The key will be who gets the better of the action on the mat. As Dariush is a solid BJJ player. We saw him knock Brenneman down, but it was his ground skills that finished the fight. He rotated his back and effortlessly sunk in that rear naked choke. He does have 4 submission wins, and he's pretty talented on the ground. Now, again, Ramsey, he's looked good on the ground, but and on the feet in the last fight, but the threats I don't think were there, at least striking from Edwards, and like I said that again. Dariush, he should be more acclimatized to his fight, to second appearance, especially the full camp. He had very short notice for his last outing. I expect to see him catch Ramsey in a flurry at some point, land with power, so my prediction is Beneil Dariush to defeat Ramsey Nijem by TKO. Bumping up a weight class, we're in the UFC's welterweight division as John Doomsday Howard, 22-8-0, battles undefeated prospect Ryan LaFlare. Now, coming into this bout, LaFlare, as I said, he's undefeated. He's also 3-0 in the UFC, which, he's got some high-quality experience there as far as that is concerned. For Howard, this is his second stint with the company. He's been successful so far, 2-0. He's 6-3 overall in the UFC. In his last 9 fights, he's 8-1. So that's a pretty impressive mark for this fighter. But, put things, again, what he's done since coming back. He's got 2 wins over very flawed fighters. The mental game of Uriah Hall certainly cost him in Howard's debut, and the grappling defense of Sierra Baharzadeh certainly was another major issue that Howard was able to exploit. Now, Howard, he has brutal knockout power, 9 knockouts overall, and he's Muay Thai based in his striking technique. He tends to be a little bit wild, and he will throw big wild haymakers and can get a little reckless with his attack, but he's got a pretty solid chin. Statistically, he needs to tighten up his striking defense. He only lands 1.76 strikes per minute while giving up 2.56, and against a guy who can throw down, that's not exactly an exchange you're willing to make. But his attitude is, if I have the power edge, I will give up those strikes to land with big power. Now, LaFlare has decent striking, but he should be wary to stand and trade with Howard, especially as if he slows down later and gets tired. LaFlare's going to have a sizable advantage in height, which should equate to a little bit of reach and should help him to keep Howard on the outside if the fight does stay standing. Now, LaFlare has shown very solid wrestling in his first 3 fights. I anticipate he's going to look to exploit that again. He has 3 submission wins overall, and he's averaged 5 takedowns at 60% in the UFC. 11 takedowns in his first 2 fights, 4 versus Court McGee. Now, he did give up 4 as well, but he showed very good top control and did, got the better of the ground exchanges. And he's a BJJ purple belt, which is pretty, decent as well. Size and skill overall makes him very hard to keep from implementing his game. He was able to will his, the takedowns on a former middleweight in McGee, so I like that aspect of his game. Now, Doomsday is also a BJJ purple belt, which shouldn't be overlooked. He has 6 submissions, and he's also used his wrestling to win fights. Averages 3.14 takedowns at 47%, 5 takedowns in his 2 combined return bouts, 5 versus Matt Brown in his final UFC fight before being cut the first time around. But he's also been dominated by solid grapplers. Jake Ellenberger took him down 5 times and ground and pound his way to a win. And Thiago Alvarez scored a pair of takedowns and out-grappled Howard at points in that fight. For my money, LaFlare should be the better grappler overall in this matchup, and that should be what carries it. Now, neither man has world-class cardio, but LaFlare has shown tendencies to slow down in fights, and Howard has a couple of come-from-behind knockouts against exhausted opponents late, which is something we'll have to keep an eye on. But again, it's hard to back a fighter simply based on his ability to come back in a late fight that he's lost the majority of. Now, LaFlare's improving striking and length of finish should allow him to keep Howard on the outside and limit the damage he takes in the feet, while he should be able to control the action with his grappling skills and top game for the most part, making Howard a little bit less effective on the feet through the fear of being taken down, and simply by wearing him out, by keeping him on his back and letting his arms fill up with blood. Either way, I think Ryan LaFlare gets the job done here, so my prediction is Ryan LaFlare to defeat John Howard by submission. In the co-main event of our 4-fight main card, we have the number 9 ranked featherweight in the world, Clay the Carpenter Guida, 30-11-0, taking on the number 12 ranked Tatsuya the Crusher Kawajiri, 33-7-2. Both very well traveled veterans. Now, both guys are former lightweights. This will be Guida's 3rd appearance as a featherweight. Hasn't looked overly great. For the most part, he held down Hatsugaoki in his debut and then got knocked out by Chad Mendes in his next appearance. Kawajiri, on the other hand, 5-0 since cutting featherweight, which includes his UFC debut victory. Now, both guys have fought a lot of high-level opponents at lightweight, and as I said, they have a lot of experience, so this is, 2 well-traveled and well-tested opponents, or fighters here. Physical matchup, almost identical. Kawajiri, though, 35 years of age. Guida, 32. It's interesting to see how that plays out as far as wear and tear and who breaks down first. Guida a couple years younger there. Kawajiri, for my opinion, he didn't look that great in his debut. His wrestling looked good, and he was persistent, and that's what got the best of his opponent. It'll be interesting to see if his his second performance is better than his debut performance. From what I saw in the first fight, he was shooting from way too far out and coming up short continually. He didn't have success until he closed the distance and really got his hands on his opponent from in tight. But he still had some trouble finishing the takedowns and holding control over a very young and inexperienced opponent. And you can tell it was physically exhausted, as Kawajiri was, very tired at the end of that fight. But he does have very good wrestling. Don't let that first appearance mislead you. Solid submission skills and 10 tap-out wins overall. He uses wrestling to dominate a very good wrestler in Josh Thompson not that long ago. And overall in his career, both outside of the UFC, he's averaged 3.86 takedowns at 56%. Now for Clay Guida, we're very well aware of what he does. He comes from a wrestling background. He's known for his durability and his pace. But he's coming off the first knockout loss of his career, so you wonder about his chin and how good it is, and if Crusher can land some ground and pound from top position, if he could exploit that again. Now, Guida's become a bit of a point fighter, but then again, not even really that, because he does more avoiding and dancing than engaging and trying to frustrate guys and maybe catch them at points. We saw that in the Gray Maynard fight. He really frustrated him with that style, but he didn't do enough to walk away at the win, despite really limiting what Gray was able to put on him. Now, Guida has been outlanded in his last 4 fights, which is a concern. But again, is Tatsuya Kawajiri the type of guy who can exploit that? The key to success for Clay is, along with keeping the pace, is his wrestling. He averages 3.48 takedowns at 39% and a 69% takedown defense. He was taken down 3 times on 5 attempts by Mendez and 0 for 4 on his own attempts, but he's very solid. Has been very solid in other fights. He took Aoki down several times, but he offered little offense from top position. His striking is a little bit rough, but he can land in flurries, and when he does look to engage, my anticipation is Guida's going to use a lot of movement and distance to force Kawajiri to chase him from the outside and pursue those takedowns, which should tax his conditioning and slow him down and allow Guida to eventually take the fight over and become more productive later. Tatsuya, I don't think he'll be able to switch gears. He's landed at least three takedowns in each of his 4 of his 5 wins at featherweight, and just a single one in his other appearance. So takedowns in wrestling have been very crucial to his success. Outside of Mendez and Ben Henderson, fighters have struggled to gain much of a wrestling-based advantage over Clay Guida. And what I think you'll see Clay simply outwork him, especially late in the fight when Kawajiri slows down. I think this might not be the prettiest of matchups. Either way, I'll take Clay Guida to defeat Tatsuya Kawajiri by decision. In the main event of the evening, the number 11th ranked heavyweight on the planet, or at least in the UFC, 34-8-1 with 1 no contest, Minotauro Nogueira battles number 9 ranked Roy Big Country Nelson, 29-0. This is a battle of aging heavyweights. Both guys come in with the age of 37. From my perspective, Big Nog is the older fighter in fight years, taking much more damage than Roy Nelson. But both guys need to win to remain relevant in the division. Unfortunately, only one of them can walk away with that. Again, a barn burner of a fight like we saw with Hunt and Bigfoot could produce good things for both men, but either way, most likely the winner of this fight stays relevant. The loser will take a big step back. Now, Nelson's coming off back-to-back losses against Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, where he was simply outclassed. Well, Big Nog was submitted by Fabricio Verdum, and he's alternated wins and losses over his last 8, and never lost back-to-back fights in his career, which is something to take into consideration here. Size-wise, Nog 3 inches of height and 4 inches of reach, which we use those different numbers in the heavyweight division. Now, the Brazilian's a BJJ black belt, 21 submission wins, but he has lost 2 of the last 3 fights that have ended in submission, and he only has 2 submission wins in his last 12 appearances, which tells us he's not getting in a position to use those grappling skills. He's very good on the mat, but he doesn't have great wrestling skills. 1.33 takedowns at 33%. His last multi-takedown fight was against Tim Sylvia, and he only landed 2 takedowns in that appearance, and that was quite some time ago. Since that fight, his opponents have outlanded him 5-1 in takedowns, and he's 1-3 in any fight where he's taken down at least once. Now, Roy, he's a BJJ black belt, 5 submission wins, but his last came in 2006, so he's really not a submission threat, especially against Nogueira. He's never been tapped out, which is something of significance. Minimal focus, though, on going to the ground. More pinning his opponent on the cage and working from the clinch is the most grappling you're going to see out of Roy Nelson. He did land 2 takedowns against Mirko Cro Cop, but not much else over his career. Cormier went 3 for 5 in takedowns, and Frank Mir landed 6 for 8. But nobody else has really had a lot of success putting him on his back. Stipe Miocic went 1 for 8, and Nelson a 58% takedown defense. So Nog's going to be in tough to get this fight to the mat and in a position to win it with his ground game. Nelson, a low center of gravity, which can make him hard to take down, and that's going to be the thing here with Nelson, or with Nogueira being taller. Nelson most likely would benefit from avoiding going to the ground unless he can get a dominant position like he did against Mirko, get Nogueira's back and pound some big shots away. I just don't see that happening. Anytime you go to the mat, as Dave Herman found out, when you willing to go to the mat with Nogueira, you're putting yourself in position to be submitted, unless you're a guy like Fabricio Verdum. Now, one thing here, I could see Nogueira using some of his ground game to wear him down, but again, that could cost him in the process as well, because he's not the most well-conditioned athlete either. I expect a lot of clinch fighting along the cage, especially with Nelson pushing him into the wall and trying to wear him down a little bit and maybe beat him up to the body. On the feet, Nog's chin is faltering. Formerly, it was made of granite, but knockout losses against Frank Mir and Cain Velasquez have a lot of people questioning whether he can take a big shot from Nelson. He has decent boxing. He showed signs of good head movement, but not a ton of power. 3 knockouts. He did stop Brendan Shaw, but honestly, who hasn't recently? 1.85 strikes landed per minute against 2.2, so he gets hit more than he actually hits. Not a good exchange rate, but again, it's better than Roy Nelson's, and Nelson is a phenomenon that he's had success with these numbers. Nelson, 2.14 strikes landed per minute versus 5.0 strikes absorbed per minute, but those numbers have been inflated by the Stipe Miocic fight, but he's not a very diverse striker. He's looking to set out, like I talked about John Howard earlier, and how he's willing to exchange fewer strikes because he has a power advantage. Nelson's very similar to that, if not greater. He's looking to set up that big hammer of an overhand right and do his damage there. We saw against Matt Mitrione, he can also do it with the uppercut where he put him away. For me, Nelson has got he's got a little bit more diverse. He's caught more diverse and quicker strikers than himself, like Mitrione, Schaub, Herman, Struve, Congo, and put him away with that big shot. So the formula does work as long as guys, like Miocic was able to exploit it. Nelson, we've seen he still has a very solid chin, but he's taken some serious beatings. Verdum blasted him with knees, and Miocic landed some huge shots. Could his chin break from the years of punishment he's taken? I really doubt it against Nogueira, at least. Nelson, though, is 2-8 overall in fights that go decision. Only one stoppage versus Arlovsky in his career. He did go 3 rounds with Mirko and stopped him, and there's a lot of questions about what's his conditioning doing, is it improving? He looks like he's getting in better shape, then he shows up at weigh-ins, and it's not that much of a change. Nogueira, 3 of Nog's last 4 wins have come inside the distance. 2 submissions, 1 knockout. Last 4 losses, all by stoppage. 2 submissions, 2 knockouts. So he's really struggled when he can't put guys away, and he has been vulnerable to being stopped himself. Nog has proven very hittable of late, where Verdum caught him with a nice overhand right, and if Mir stopped him, then Nelson certainly has the power to do it as well. Nelson needs to avoid being one-dimensional, but he has to land with power early in that fight before he slows down and his poor cardio takes over. I see Nogueira simply being too slow, not diverse enough, and he tends to put his back in the cage, which will allow Nelson to close in, and that really limits Nogueira's ability. So my prediction is Roy Nelson to defeat Big Nog by TKO. So those are my 4 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night event. All my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. All of the other guys on my panel and Josh Harper with the Kamikaze Kid are looking to rebound after a pretty weak night like we all had, like most predictors had. So what I anticipate is that you're going to see, I'd like to say I'm going to have a better night, but hey, there is room to go down. So either way, hopefully this works out for us, and I'll do my best to get my preliminary predictions on point. And thank you very much for tuning in as always. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.